everyone, welcome to Movement and Me, an initiative that is designed for budding artists across the world who wish to pursue their career in art. I'm your host Niharika, and on this show you will hear artists talk about their lives and the choices they had to make in pursuit of arts. We will also get to use some tips and key learnings from the lives of these artists, along with a detailed discussion on their areas of interest. So quickly hop onto a journey into the world of arts along with us. Hi everyone, welcome back to Movement and Me. The second part is here with us. Sanyukta had a huge and an extensive conversation with us about the different kinds of strategies and tools that can be used to bring in conversations on social change in school spaces. We also looked at how a subject like history can be used in conjunction with social change to sort of create a much more deeper awareness in the students and get them to ask relevant questions. This brings us to part 2, where we are specifically going to look at some of the ways in which subjects such as math, science can be used to, also teach and create awareness on social change, but at the same time discuss about Skinclude, which has been one of the most I would say most amazing, but also quite popular movement that Sanyukta has worked with along with her students. Sanyukta, that brings me to my first question for part 2. We have discussed some of the subjects that can be, incorporated, or I would say combined, joined together with the concepts of social change to bring in a much deeper conversation. But there are subjects like maths and science which may not very easily, be combined together with the concepts of social change. So can you give us some ideas in which maths and science, subjects like maths and science can be also used to create or have conversations on it?
Absolutely. So you're completely right when you say that it's more seamless, the integration is more seamless with subjects like languages and history and social studies, and it's much harder with science and math, but they're definitely possible is the first thing I will tell you is when we look at subjects like science and math, we're often looking at the technical aspects of it, right? We're teaching the theories and we're teaching the formulae and all of that, but there are human aspects to the subject, right? So for example, STEM, which includes both science and math, have typically been fields where you don't have high rates of female participation, right? Okay. So even talking about those two students, right? Talking about women scientists in your classroom, talking about the inventions that they have done or discoveries made by them and their contributions to the field of science and math, right? And I think that is really inspiring for students because that encourages them to want to explore it, right? So a lot of research suggests that in younger grades, both boys and girls equally interested in the idea of wanting to become scientists or participate in the field. And as you grow, you'll see that even though many girls are doing well, they choose to drop the subject and they go for other fields. And while children should have the opportunity to do that, but if they are actually interested, they should pursue it and they shouldn't drop it just because they think that that is a male-dominated world, right? Because there are lots of women who have carved out a space for themselves in those fields. So I think bringing in we don't usually bring in stories into the science and math classes. And I think that's a really understated and simple way of bringing social change into your math and science classrooms, is bringing stories of change and discussing them, or even, for example, discussing something that might have created some kind of controversy, or some religious beliefs, for example, have some kind of scientific backing or like reasoning, and sometimes they don't, right? Some of our beliefs may some of our practices may actually go against scientific belief, right, or scientific practice, and discussing those with kids and just like why people choose something over the other. So I think these are really easy ways in which you can make it happen. Again, I think the onus lies on schools because teachers have not been trained to do this. They've not been exposed to how this can happen. So if schools can find ways to do that, and there's a lot of knowledge available out there now, because a lot more people are thinking about this, right? They're thinking about how you can incorporate this across fields and across subjects. So there is information out there, and I think it's worth thinking about at least. But I would say if a school hasn't started it and is just wondering what to do, start with the social studies curriculum, start with art, start with language, because those are definitely the easier spaces to begin.
Yes, ones, yeah.
Yeah.
You've pointed something very important here, and I think I just reiterate it for everybody to remember and remind it again, put it on the forefront. Um, the interdisciplinary approach to curriculum and teaching. I think that's what the emphasis is. I think because when you talk about introducing storytelling and introducing the historical aspects of maths into their curriculum, what you're essentially asking them to do is sort of dehumanizing maths as a subject, humanize it, introduce historical references. The progress that we have made in the mathematical sphere has not happened because of one person or out of the blue. It has happened because of the hard work that was put in by multiple people at different points of time. A lot of theories were put out there which were then discredited because they did not actually, um, uh, prove themselves to be applicable to all aspects and all of that. There's a lot of research that has gone into. There's a lot of I would say background struggle that has been put in by different people at different points of time, which has led to the progress that we see in the maths and the science spaces. And I think thank you so much for mentioning and articulating it in the way that you have. What we are looking at today is the interdisciplinary approach that we need to have in our school spaces, so that we don't really separate everything from each other and try to teach them in their silos, because at the end of the day they were never happening in silos. They never actually took place in the way that you're being taught. Science, for that matter, also has had its own journey, and during the journey different people contributed at different points of time. They actually helped science get to the point that it is today. The Large Hadron Collider that we have is also because of somebody. It's somebody's creation. So I think that's something that we seem to forget all the time, and we seem to sort of constantly separate out. And I'm really thankful that you brought it up for everybody to sort of know more about. On that note, this brings me to the most interesting part of the question of the entire second part, which is about Skinclude. So I have mentioned briefly in your introduction about Skinclude, but what I want you to do is describe in detail how did you get started, what drove you to actually bring Skinclude to the forefront as a conversation, why did you choose colorism as one of the things that you wanted to identify and target in terms of creating awareness, and also how did the students contribute across throughout so far? What was the contribution that students had in the entire process?
Okay. I'm going to try to address all the questions that you asked, starting from the beginning, right? So, as a school community, the ACRES Foundation is fully engaged in teaching students about social and environmental issues. And we do address issues. We are, in fact, designing a program where we can teach our students about issues of gender, caste, class, all of this. But when we started, when the pandemic began and we started doing school online, we realized this was a very complicated course, and already there was so much pressure on teachers and students to sort of take school online, right? And then to add this complicated layer would be too much for especially our teachers to handle. So we just focused on getting online. But then once everything was settled, and we realized that, you know what, there is some space in the school day for us to engage our students in social issues, and what should we really do? Where should we really begin? We were looking at some of the data that we collect as a school from students, and some of our students mentioned we asked them questions around bullying, and some kids mentioned that they had been bullied because of the color of their skin. In fact, even during the school council campaigning, the person who ended up becoming head boy talked about how this is an issue that he wants to take up in the school as a head boy, because as a school captain, because he thinks it's really important to talk about and really important to address, because this is a problem in the school community. And I think that for us was the starting point of like really thinking about which social issue to address. And we also realized that if children are already talking about it, this is definitely something that they relate to, right? That they know something about, at least in terms of personal experience. So it would be sort of easier to do online, given the limits of like virtual schooling. So we said, you know what, let's do it. But at the same time, uh, we were just like, we didn't know how to engage all of the students. And, people have a lot going on at home with the pandemic. So we decided to make it an optional course. We rolled it out to students from grades 4 to 7. And we said, whoever's interested, this is going to be an additional class for no extra charge, right? So we had around 100 to 120 students sign up for it between grades 4 to 7. And so we divided them into 6 different batches. And what we did is it was a 6-month course. For the first 3 months, children spent time once a week for 45 minutes to an hour studying the theory of the issue, right? So they studied about what does dark skin stigma mean, the science of skin color, right? So that's another way where you can make the connection, right? So they studied about what melanin is, how it gives you the skin color, what roles do genes play in the color of your skin. They went into studying about things like causes and consequences of dark skin stigma, what have been initiatives that people have taken to address this issue. We had debates on things like, would Fair and Lovely's name changing to Glow and Lovely really make any difference or not? So we did a lot of those kind of things. And then we came to the social action piece, right? So for us at our school, the way we teach social issues is we always try to incorporate some element of action so that students can create change and really participate in change and doing something about the issue within their community. So when we were really looking at solutions, one of the things we realized is a lot of the work that had been done in addressing this issue of dark skin stigma had been in adult circles for adults primarily. Mm-hmm. And even when we were designing the program, one of the things we found was it was hard finding some resources. There weren't enough picture books, for example, for younger kids to explain the issues to, right? It's not like there weren't completely anything, but there weren't enough. So we decided to sort of use this opportunity to create resources for children to sort of educate them further and create more awareness about this issue. So what the kids did is, by everything that they had learned in the first 3 months regarding melanin, people's experiences, they decided to create it into projects. And our 6 groups did 6 different projects. So we had our 4th and 5th graders, where we had 4 groups. They all worked on books. So 3 of our classes worked on picture books. One of them interviewed people who had experienced dark. They interviewed around 10 people, children and adults both, who had experienced dark skin stigma and how they dealt with it. So they used those interviews to write stories and create illustrations of those people's experiences. Then we had one group created a short film. They did the research, they wrote the script, met to shoot the film, shot it, edited it, everything. And the last group basically wanted to sort of take this movement to as many children as possible. So they designed merchandise. So they created which we partnered then with this homegrown brand called EFJ, who's the owner is related to one of our teachers. She's friends, with one of our teachers. So in partnership with them, we decided to sell like t-shirts, badges, and notebooks. And we're using the funds that we collected from our sales to partner with this NGO called Saturday Art Class, which is based on arts education. What Saturday Art Class is going to do is use the funds that we give them to incorporate colorism into their program, to teach children about this issue of dark skin stigma. Because every time we talk to educators about it, they always tell us that, yes, even our students face it, but like, where do we really start? So we're supporting Saturday Art Class and not only giving them the funds, but also creating the content that will help them take this program to the kids in their communities. So these are the different things we're doing. So when we realize sort of all of these moving parts of different projects, we decided to sort of club all of them under a big program, sort of one brand. And our students actually came up with the name Skinclude. So we had like a branding agency come into a workshop with our students on how to name a movement. It was a very exciting workshop. So once they did that, we sort of went back, looked at the notes of the program and everything, and our students came up with the names. So everyone sort of submitted it, and then we voted on like the name that was the most popular, and the students and the teachers sort of then worked on the logo and then the designs, all of that. So Skinclude is basically a movement which has all the books, the resources, and the merchandise that we're selling.
That's quite interesting, and I think I'm really in awe of all of the effort and hard work that you and your students have put in. The idea of having illustrative books available for students to look and go through is as exciting as wearing a merchandise that is trying to suggest that you're in support of this movement, and that you also believe that colorism should sort of go away now. It's high time.
Yeah,
And I think one of the interesting things that I have picked up from this conversation of yours is that if it's an issue that concerns our students, they're going to be even more invested in it, and they're going to put in a lot more hard work than they probably would otherwise if they're not interested in this case.
absolutely.
And I think that itself makes a huge difference, because saying that reading for 3 months on their own on a topic, on a subject which was optional, is a huge deal, which means that students today, they don't lack initiative or drive. What they lack is the connection between what they're learning and the real life events that they're experiencing. Because very frankly, and I think you pointed this out at the very beginning of our interview, like before we started recording, that this what the students are experiencing today is something that students nobody has in fact experienced in their lifetime before. And to even suggest that, even to a remote suggestion that it's okay, things will be fine, is actually a huge fat lie. Because honestly, these are some very turbulent times we're living in, and every day we're hearing something or the other going wrong, or something bad happening. People struggling to find beds in ICUs, and people struggling to find oxygen cylinders and all of that. It's a real issue. And sadly, um, what I'm learning to comprehend and understand about the situation is that we all need to let our students learn the skills of living, find connections between what they're learning in their school spaces, in their curriculums, be it math, science, English, any subject for that matter, with what they've learned and what they're experiencing in their life. That relationship is the most important task right now. You cannot get a student excited about addition subtraction without actually introducing the idea that there are people who have historically put an effort to create concepts of addition and subtraction, which is why you are able to add and subtract today, which helps you in different ways. And I think that lens is a very, very important lens that we need to have at this point of time. This
Absolutely.
um, Sanyukta brings me to my next question, which again is something that I am excited about because I'm an arts educator myself. But this is a question about how arts can be used to, have conversations on social change. What are the ways that arts can be used as a medium, as a tool, or also as an agency to engage in conversations on social change? And I would like to have a conversation and probably even a discussion on this with you. So maybe you could give us a few ideas, and then maybe I could add some more.
Yeah, and I would love for you to add. So, like I mentioned, we're working with this NGO called Saturday Art Class, where we're looking to sort of match like their sort of artistic bent with our social change bent and bring those two together. And while working on it, we realized how much potential there was to sort of integrate the two. So very simple things, right? Like when you want children to express how they're feeling about an issue, or when you want them to express their ideas for how to address the issue, arts is a great medium for them to do that, right? So one of our first, I'll give you like a really specific example. One of our first sort of lessons in the Saturday art class and Skinclude collaboration was students creating a self-portrait and coloring it, right? So and we did that in Skinclude, the way we did it is we asked the kids to, color the portrait. And then we said, okay, now look at the color of your portrait and look at your own skin color. For how many of you does this represent your actual skin color? And a lot of kids were like, no, it actually doesn't. Like, they were like, we used the skin crayon, and we're like, does the skin crayon match your own skin color? And they were like, no, it doesn't. And that's when we had this whole conversation about how skin color is actually a spectrum, and there are so many shades of uh, skin tone, and how, because fair skin is so normalized, we end up calling peach skin, but that's not actually skin, and that's peach. And we ask students then to recreate their portrait so that they could use a color that was closer to their skin tone. So that was one of the activities we did. And even when we wanted, so for example, like when our students had to create picture books, right? It was our arts team at Greenacres actually came in to support our students to help them create those picture books, right? Because they had all these ideas that they wanted to communicate, but they got a lot of guidance from their art teachers of what is the best way to sort of, communicate that, like draw those images that actually say a story, and it's not just like a still image. You want your image to communicate something. So I think definitely that's one of the ways to do it. Even our students who made a film making a film is also a form of artistic expression, right? So everything that they decided in terms of what the story would be versus what the background music is, even with the name of the project, all of these are ways of artistically expressing their understanding of dark skin stigma and communicating that to the world. So I think there are lots of different ways to do this, and I would love to hear from you how you think social change sort of fits in. These were just two ideas that came from my own experience.
I think two of the ideas that you've given are very powerful and relevant, also because it kind of talks about a product that gets created at the end of the journey as well, which also has to go through the process of getting to the point of creating it. Um, but I also feel like arts can be a process-based learning, which is why the one of the reasons why I'm pointing this out is because maybe not all endeavors and explorations may lead to a product being developed at the end of it.
Definitely.
But I
Yeah.
think it's important to have the journey going to get students to ask questions. And I will go back to what you said at the very beginning in part one, where you said that discussions are what matter. Discussions matter. Conversations matter. Experiencing the concept, the issue, that's what matters. It's not about creating an artwork or creating a movie at the end of it. Yes, of course, sometimes in some cases, like in yours, you were successfully able to create a movie out of it because it happened, because it was a possible outcome of the journey that you had charted out. But it may not be the case for all, and it may not be the case all the time. And I think this is something that is very important to understand, especially when you're in the school space, because with limited time and with limited amount of resources, and even limited amount of time that students can invest, process-based learning becomes a lot more easier to achieve and implement versus a product-based learning approach, because a product-based learning approach needs to it requires a different set of, I would say, nurturing and exploration and exposure. Like in your case, there was a workshop on branding for Skinclude to understand how branding works, what are the things that you need to keep in mind when creating a logo, why do you need to have a brand, what does it do for the company or the movement for that matter. So these are things that people have talked about and explored in depth, and I think that those are the kind of conversations that you need to have when you're creating a product, or like a movie or a picture book or something of that sort, but may not be necessary when it comes to process-based learning, which may end as an end of a chapter or like an end of a unit in a school space. So one of the things that we do in our school with arts is also to try and get the students to look at different mediums. Like in your case, you've done with Bollywood. We've also got them to look at music lyrics of different. There's been a lot of this sudden surge of rap songs that has happened in the country, and
Yeah.
a lot of the rap music involves a certain kind of language. which may also have a certain impact on the minds of the students or children who are listening to it extensively and all the time. So I think one of the things that we did was to get the students to rewrite the lyrics of some of the rap songs to see what they can
Wow.
do. And the way that it was done is by giving the students information and training them into writing rap in the first place. What is the purpose of rap? How did it get started? How do you write rap in the first place? Like, how does one get to writing those rap lyrics for the rap song? And I think when the students started rewriting the lyrics, they realized that there were so many issues in the existing lyrics, sentences that were very problematic from the point of view of addressing someone. Just using them as a, I'm not sure if that's the right word for it, but just using them to describe somebody, a human being, be it woman or man. And I think that itself was being questioned when they were rewriting the lyrics. And this kind of gets me excited, because what the work that you're doing and the work that we are doing in the school somehow are almost in line with each other, and they're just working parallelly
Absolutely.
in their own spaces.
And
um,
Harik, I just wanted to add something to
yes.
what you were saying about the process driven approach. Those are actually the experiences that really stick with students, right? So when we did this whole activity around create your self portrait and like color
Right.
it,
Mm,
when our kids ended up writing their picture books,
right.
that's the story that they chose to write, right? Because they wrote an entire book on an art class where students had to make a self portrait, right? So they literally
Wow.
took that process based art activity that we did and made it into a book at the end of it. So I think that those processes that you mentioned of art, like even with your activity of going in depth into the lyrics and rewriting them, these kind of experiences are what really stick with students because it really pushes them to think and challenge what they know to be true.
Right. And I think that and I'm really glad you're doing this, and I'm hoping that I could actually get into a conversation with you later on and see if we can collaborate and figure something out which can be a little more bigger than what we are doing in our individual silos, again.
Absolutely.
So I think that's something I'm going to pick up as a project later on. Uh, but
I would love
for
that.
but for now, we are coming to the end of our podcast series. Thank you so much for both the parts. Thank you so much for extensively talking about everything that you've experienced, the conversations, the thoughts that you brought from from Columbia University, Teachers College Columbia University, to here in back to India. And thank you so much for implementing something called a social change curriculum. This entire
It's
podcast
been my
was
pleasure,
very
and
useful.
I love talking to you, and I think it made it so real. And through whatever ways I can share the ideas that I have, whether it's through this podcast or potentially us collaborating in the future, my hope is really to get as many kids as we can engaged in
Absolutely.
conversations like this, engaged in programs like this, so that the future of our country is in better hands than we are currently today.
Absolutely. And this brings me to my last question before we wrap everything up. This question is something that I've asked everybody in the art spaces. I'm going to tweak it a little. As an educator, what is what are some of the takeaways that you would like to share with the people who might be watching this podcast? Something that they might actually go out and implement or look forward to. We're looking at targeting people who are either interested in getting into education or who might want to like think about education as a possible professional space.
I think if you are looking at getting into education, one of the big things I would tell you is definitely engage in teaching. While there is a lot more you can do in education, no matter whether you're working at the policy level or you're designing curriculum, I would say spend time in the classroom because that is when any kind of change that you would like to make happen will start feeling real because you will be able to empathize. So when you're designing policy or when you're designing programs, it becomes real for you because you actually spend time in the classroom and that teaching is very dynamic. I know as non-educators, people have like a slightly more narrow perception, but like every day is a new day. You're learning so much and it's really challenging. It's not as easy as like maybe movies portray teachings to be. Teaching to be. So I would say definitely if you are thinking of getting into education, start with teaching. And your career, there are so many career opportunities in this space, but if you start with teaching, it will open your eyes to the different problems that exist in the education space, and then you'll be in a better place to take decisions of whether you want to work in at a micro level, macro level, policy, curriculum, teacher training, whatever it is that you want to work in. It'll give you a very, very good idea of what to do. And I think the second thing is reach out to educators, speak to them, because everyone's teaching experiences are different and there's always something to learn from it. So speak to as many people as you can in order to learn for yourself what it's like, even if that means maybe spending time in their classroom, when things open up, or even like attending their virtual classroom now. So spend time with educators, see what they're actually doing, see the effort that it takes to, even teach a single lesson for that matter. So these are two really, I think, basic things, and something I really, really believe in. I always tell people teaching is, to me, the only gateway into education. So I highly recommend that. And if you keep reading, there's enough information available out there for you to understand the space better, for you to understand, maybe say how to include arts into education, how to include social change into education. There is information out there. It isn't that there isn't. But again, nothing like people's stories. So reach out to people who are doing this work and engage with them so that you can then make an informed decision.
Thank you so much for that. Those are some wise words, and people should definitely keep them in mind. Will come in handy for anyone who's looking to get into education space. Thank you so much for participating in the podcast, Sanyukta. It was a pleasure to have you here, to have, to be able to go through the nitty-gritties of the process of designing a curriculum, to discussing different strategies that can be used. And I think this was one of the most informative interviews that I've done in a very long time. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Niharika. I absolutely love talking to you.
I'm glad.
Thank you all for tuning into Movement and Me, an initiative that is designed for budding artists across the world. To continue receiving notifications on our latest episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel Natya Mandalam or look us up on Apple Podcasts or Spotify for more information. I'm your host Niharika, and I'll see you all next week.